The red warning lights flashed across the command center of Nexus Prime as another explosion shook the massive space station. Commander Cathara gripped the metal rail with her clawed hands, her feathered wings folding tight against her back. The bird-like alien watched the tactical display with growing horror. Every green dot that represented a coalition ship was disappearing one by one. "Commander, we've lost contact with the outer defense ring," reported Captain Zixal, his insect-like eyes clicking as he processed the incoming data. "The Vorthons have broken through Sector 7. Cathara's beak clicked in frustration. 3 years. 3 long years since the Vorthon Empire had begun their conquest of the galaxy, and now they were here. The last stronghold of the 12-species coalition was falling just like all the others. "How many ships do we have left?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would be terrible. 17, Commander. Most are damaged. 17 ships against 3,000. The numbers were impossible. But what made it worse was not just the enemy's superior numbers. It was their weapon. The thing that had allowed them to conquer world after world without losing a single battle. On the main screen, Cathara could see the massive Vorthon dreadnoughts approaching. The ships looked like they were made of bone and metal fused together, with strange organic tubes running along their hulls. Those tubes contained the neural control pods that had made the Vorthons unstoppable. "Sir, we're getting reports from the surface," another officer said. His voice was shaking. "The Vorthons have deployed the pods in the residential districts." Cathara closed her eyes. She had seen this before on a dozen other worlds. The Vorthons would drop their biomechanical pods from orbit. The pods would release a neural mist that would seep into the minds of every living being in the area. Within minutes, entire populations would be under Vorthon control. Mothers would turn against their children. Soldiers would fire on their own commanders. It was the most horrifying weapon anyone had ever seen. "Commander, incoming transmission." From the surface, the communications officer called out. "It's General Mordak from the ground forces." The holographic image of a large rock-like alien appeared in the center of the command room. General Mordak's stone-like face was cracked with stress, and his voice was deep and rumbling. "Cathara, we don't have much time. The neural mist is spreading faster than we can evacuate. My troops they're turning. I can see them in the distance marching toward our position with their weapons raised." "How long do you have?" Cathara asked. "Maybe 2 hours. Maybe less. The mist is moving through the air vents in the underground bunkers. We've sealed ourselves in, but it won't hold for long." Cathara looked at the tactical display again. The Vorthon fleet was positioning itself for a final assault. Soon they would begin the orbital bombardment that would soften up any remaining resistance. Then would come the ground troops, followed by more neural pods. Within 6 hours, Nexus Prime would be just another controlled world in the Vorthon Empire. "Sir," Captain Zixal said quietly, "perhaps we should consider surrender. At least then some of our people might survive as slaves." Cathara said bitterly, "You've seen what happens to controlled populations. They become nothing more than tools for the Vorthons to use." She had watched the recordings from conquered worlds, entire civilizations reduced to mindless workers, building ships and weapons for their Vorthon masters. The controlled beings could still think and feel, but they could not disobey. They were trapped in their own bodies, screaming silently as they were forced to betray everything they had once believed in. Another explosion rocked the station. Through the viewport, Cathara could see the burning wreckage of a coalition cruiser spinning slowly in space. The Vorthons were not even trying to capture ships anymore. They had enough. Now they just wanted to eliminate any possible resistance. "Commander," the communications officer said, "we're receiving a message from the Vorthon fleet. They're demanding our immediate surrender." "Put it through," Cathara said. The image of a Vorthon Supreme Commander appeared on the screen. The reptilian, alien-scaled face was cold and emotionless, with yellow eyes that seemed to look right through her. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding metal. "Commander Cathara of the Dying Coalition, I am Supreme Commander Vexilon of the Vorthon Empire. Your resistance has been noted and found inadequate. Surrender now, and your people will be granted quick neural integration. Refuse, and we will make the process unpleasant." "We will never surrender to you," Cathara said, spreading her wings in a gesture of defiance. The Coalition has fought for freedom for 1,000 years. We won't stop now. Vexlan's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. Very well. You have chosen suffering over peace. Your neural integration will begin in 1 hour. Prepare your people for their new purpose. The transmission ended. Cathara looked around the command center at her officers. They were all different species, but they all had the same look in their eyes. Fear, but also determination. They would fight to the end, even if the end was only an hour away. Open all frequencies, Cathara ordered. All coalition ships, all ground forces, all civilian stations. I want everyone to hear this. The communications officer nodded and activated the transmitters. Cathara took a deep breath and began to speak. This is Commander Cathara of the Coalition Defense Force. In 1 hour, the Vorthan Empire will begin their final assault on Nexus Prime. When they do, the last free world in the galaxy will fall. We have fought bravely, but we have fought alone. To any species out there listening, to any free beings in the universe, remember us. Remember that we tried to stop them. Remember that freedom is worth fighting for, even when there is no hope of victory. She paused, looking out at the approaching Vorthan fleet. We are the last light in the darkness. When we go out, the galaxy will be theirs. But maybe somewhere out there, someone will hear this message. Someone who can succeed where we have failed. Someone who can. The transmission was cut short as another massive explosion tore through the station's hull. The lights flickered and went out, leaving only the emergency illumination casting red shadows across the command center. In the darkness, Cathara could hear the sound of Vorthan ships moving closer. The end was coming. Captain Lisa Rodriguez rubbed her tired eyes as she stared at the computer screen in the Deep Space Communications Array station. She had been monitoring space signals for 12 hours straight, and most of what came through was just cosmic noise. Radio waves from distant stars, electromagnetic pulses from black holes, the usual background chatter of the universe. But this signal was different. Computer, replay the transmission from Sector 77 Alpha, she said, leaning forward in her chair. The speakers crackled to life, and Lisa heard what sounded like a voice speaking in an unknown language, but underneath the alien words there were patterns, mathematical sequences, numbers that any intelligent species would recognize. Prime numbers, the value of pi, basic physics constants. Someone's trying to talk to us, Lisa whispered to herself. She had been working at the communications array for 8 years, ever since graduating from the Space Force Academy. In all that time, she had never heard anything like this. Earth had been searching for signs of alien life for over a century, and now it seemed like alien life had found them first. Lisa quickly ran the signal through the translation program. The computer worked for several minutes, using the mathematical patterns to build a basic understanding of the alien language. Slowly, words began to appear on her screen. This is Commander Cathara of the Coalition Defense Force. In 1 hour, the Vorthan Empire will begin their final assault on Nexus Prime. When they do, the last free world in the galaxy will fall. Lisa's heart began to race. She read the rest of the message, her eyes growing wider with each sentence. An entire galactic civilization was being destroyed by an empire that could control minds. Billions of beings were crying out for help across the void of space. We have fought bravely, but we have fought alone. To any species out there listening, to any free beings in the universe, remember us. The message included detailed information about the Vorthan Empire, their ships, their weapons, their tactics, but most importantly, it included information about their neural control technology, how it worked, how it spread, and what kind of biological systems it could affect. Lisa grabbed her phone and called her commanding officer. Colonel Peterson, you need to get down here right now. We've got something big. 20 minutes later, Colonel Peterson was standing behind Lisa's chair, reading the translated message over her shoulder. His face was pale. Are you sure this is real? He asked. This could be some kind of hoax. Sir, look at the data, Lisa said, pointing to her analysis screen. The signal came from the direction of the Kepler 4402 system, over 1,100 light-years away. The transmission was sent using quantum entanglement communication, which means it traveled instantly across space. We've been working on that technology for decades and never figured it out. Colonel Peterson was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up his secure phone. Get me General Martinez at Space Command. Tell him it's urgent. 2 hours later, General Tony Martinez was sitting in the Pentagon's most secure briefing room with a dozen of the military's top officers. On the wall screen, Lisa's translated message was displayed for everyone to read. So let me understand this, said Admiral Nancy Foster, the head of space operations. An alien species is asking for help fighting a war against an empire that can control minds? That's correct, Admiral, Lisa said. She had been flown to Washington immediately after the discovery. But there's more. I've been analyzing the biological data they sent about the neural control technology. It seems to work by releasing airborne particles that affect the brain's electrical activity. Dr. Kevin Hayes, the military's chief biologist, leaned forward. And you think humans might be immune? It's possible, Lisa said. According to the data, the Vorthan neural control affects species that evolved on low-gravity worlds. Their brain chemistry is different from ours, but humans evolved on a high-gravity planet. Our neural pathways are much more complex and heavily shielded. General Martinez looked around the table. Are we seriously considering getting involved in an alien war? Sir, said Colonel Jake Morrison, who had been listening quietly. If this species is telling the truth, then we're looking at a galactic empire that enslaves entire civilizations. If they finish conquering the galaxy, how long before they come for Earth? That could be hundreds or thousands of years from now, Admiral Foster said. Or it could be next week, Colonel Morrison replied. We don't know how fast they can travel or how quickly they expand, but we do know that every day we wait, more innocent beings are being enslaved. Dr. Hayes pulled up another screen showing human brain scans. I've been running simulations based on the alien data. The neural control particles would need to cross the blood-brain barrier to be effective. But human brains have evolved much thicker barriers because of our planet's radiation levels and atmospheric pressure. So we might actually be immune? General Martinez asked. There's a good chance, yes. And if we are immune, then we could potentially reverse the effects on other species. Human bioelectric fields might be able to disrupt the neural control signals. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Finally, Admiral Foster spoke up. Even if we wanted to help, how would we get there? The nearest signal came from over 1,000 light-years away. Colonel Morrison pulled out a classified folder. Actually, Admiral, we might have a way. The experimental fold space drive has been ready for testing for 6 months. We've been afraid to use it because the risks were too high. What kind of risks? General Martinez asked. The ship might not survive the fold. The crew might not survive. We might end up anywhere in the galaxy or nowhere at all. But if we're successful, we could travel thousands of light-years in a matter of days. Admiral Foster shook her head. You're talking about sending our people on a suicide mission to help aliens we've never met. No, Admiral, Colonel Morrison said firmly. I'm talking about doing what's right. These beings are facing extinction. They're being enslaved by monsters who steal their minds and turn them into puppets. If we can help them, don't we have a duty to try? General Martinez stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. If we do this, we'd be committing our entire space fleet. Ships, crews, everything. It would leave Earth defenseless. Sir, Lisa said quietly, there's something else. The signal is getting weaker. I think Nexus Prime has already fallen. If there are any survivors, they won't last long. We have maybe 48 hours to decide. The general turned back to face the room. I need to talk to the president, but I want everyone here to think about what we're discussing. We're talking about launching the largest military operation in human history to save people we've never seen, in a war we don't understand, using technology that might kill us all. He paused, looking at each officer in turn. But maybe that's exactly what makes us human. Maybe that's why we're the ones who got this message. Maybe the universe needs someone crazy enough to try. As the meeting broke up, Lisa stayed behind to monitor for more signals. Deep in space, the cries for help were growing fainter. But for the first time in her life, she felt like humanity was about to do something truly important. something that would change everything. The fold space drive powered down with a deep humming sound that Commander Jack Phillips could feel in his bones. Around him, the bridge of the human warship Freedom's Call was filled with flashing warning lights and the sound of damage reports, coming in from all decks. "Status report," Phillips called out, gripping his command chair as the ship shuddered. "Fold space jump successful, sir," reported Lieutenant Danny Kim from the navigation station. "But we've got hull stress fractures on decks 4 through 7. The experimental drive pushed us harder than expected." Phillips looked at the main screen and felt his breath catch in his throat. They had made it. After 3 days of traveling, through folded space, risking their lives with untested technology, they had actually arrived at the Nexus Prime system. But what he saw made his heart sink. The space around the massive alien space station was filled with burning wreckage. Hundreds of destroyed ships drifted in the void, their hull plates twisted and melted by enemy weapons, and surrounding it all were the Vorthan ships. "My God," whispered Captain Sarah Mitchell from the tactical station. "There are so many of them." Phillips counted quickly. At least 3,000 enemy vessels, ranging from small fighters to massive dreadnoughts that were longer than Earth's biggest cities. The human fleet consisted of 12 ships, 12 against 3,000. "Sir," Lieutenant Kim said, his voice tight with fear, "sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. The Vorthons are conducting orbital bombardment." On the screen, Phillips could see bright flashes of light as the enemy ships fired down at the planet below. Each flash meant thousands of alien civilians were dying. The Coalition's last stronghold was being destroyed while he watched. "Commander," came a voice from the communications station. "We're receiving a transmission. It's from the space station." "Put it through," Phillips ordered. The image of a bird-like alien appeared on the screen. Her feathers were singed and dirty, and there was desperation in her large eyes. "Unknown vessels, this is Commander Cathara of the Coalition Defense Force. I don't know who you are, but you need to leave this system immediately. The Vorthons will destroy you just like they destroyed us." Phillips stood up from his chair. This was it. First contact with an alien species, and it was happening in the middle of a war zone. "Commander Cathara, this is Commander Jack Phillips of the Human Space Force. We received your distress signal. We're here to help." Cathara's beak opened in shock. "Human? I have never heard of your species, but you cannot help us. The Vorthons have weapons that will turn your own people against you. You must flee while you still can." "Ma'am, with respect, we didn't travel across the galaxy just to run away," Phillips said. "All ships, prepare for combat. Target the nearest Vorthan vessels." "Sir," Captain Mitchell said, "the Vorthans are moving to intercept us. Looks like they're confused about what we are." Phillips could see why. The human ships looked nothing like Coalition vessels. They were smaller, more angular, and covered in armor plating that had been designed for Earth's harsh environment. To the Vorthons, they probably looked like some kind of new alien species. "Sir, the lead Vorthon ship is transmitting," the communications officer reported. "Let's hear it," Phillips said. A new image appeared on the screen. This time it was a reptilian alien with cold yellow eyes and scales that seemed to shimmer in the light. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding metal. "Unknown species I am. Supreme Commander Vexlan of the Vorthon Empire. You will surrender immediately and prepare for neural integration. Resistance will result in your destruction." Phillips looked at the alien commander for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Supreme Commander, this is Commander Phillips. I've got a message for your empire." He paused dramatically. "Go to hell." The transmission ended, and Phillips turned to his crew. "All ships engage." The human fleet spread out into attack formation and dove toward the Vorthon lines. The enemy ships moved to meet them, confident that 12 small vessels would be easy prey. They were wrong. The first Vorthon ship to engage the humans fired its neural control pods directly at the Freedom's Call. The biomechanical projectiles struck the human ship's hull and released clouds of the mind control mist. Nothing happened. "Sir," Lieutenant Kim reported with excitement in his voice, "the neural mist is having no effect on our crew. Repeat, no effect at all." Phillips grinned. Dr. Hayes had been right. Human brains were immune to the Vorthon weapon. All ships, press the attack. Show them what happens when they pick on someone who can fight back. The human vessels tore into the Vorten formation like wolves among sheep. The enemy had never faced opponents who were immune to their primary weapon. Their tactics were built around the idea that any enemy would be quickly controlled and turned against their own forces. But the humans kept fighting. The Freedom's Call's main guns opened fire on a Vorthon cruiser, punching holes through its organic hull. Captain Ryan Davis in the ship. Defiant rammed his vessel directly into a Vorthon dreadnought, his crew cheering as they tore through the enemy's biomechanical armor. "Commander," Captain Mitchell called out, "I'm reading massive confusion in the Vorthon fleet. They're not responding to our attacks the way they should. It's like they don't know how to fight an enemy they can't control." Phillips nodded. The Vorthons had conquered the galaxy by turning their enemies into slaves. They had forgotten how to fight a real war. "Sir, we're getting reports from the planet's surface," the communications officer said. "Human drop pods are landing in the occupied zones." On the planet below, Sergeant Maria Santos kicked open the door of her drop pod and immediately opened fire on the nearest Vorthon ground troops. Her platoon spread out around her, their weapons cutting down the reptilian soldiers who had been rounding up civilian prisoners. But something strange was happening. As the human soldiers moved through the area, the alien civilians who had been under neural control began to wake up. The mind control effect was breaking down just by being near the humans. "Sergeant Santos to all units," Maria called into her radio. "The locals are snapping out of it. I repeat, our presence is reversing the neural control." One of the freed aliens, a rock-like being with glowing eyes, stumbled toward Maria. When he spoke, his voice was filled with wonder. "The fog in my mind. It's gone. How is this possible?" "Don't know, buddy," Maria said, helping the alien to his feet. "But we're here to help. Can you fight?" The alien picked up a weapon from a fallen Vorthon soldier. "I can fight. We all can. Fight now." Across the planet, the same scene was playing out. Wherever human troops landed, the neural control broke down. Enslaved coalition soldiers remembered who they were and turned their weapons on their Vorthon masters. Back in space, Commander Phillips watched as the tide of battle began to turn. The Vorthon fleet, which had seemed so unstoppable just minutes ago, was now retreating in confusion. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from Commander Kithara," the communications officer reported. The bird-like alien appeared on the screen again, but this time her eyes were filled with hope instead of despair. "Commander Phillips, I don't understand what's happening, but my people are fighting again. The neural control is failing everywhere your forces are present. How are you doing this?" Phillips looked at the tactical display, where human and coalition ships were now working together to drive back the Vorthon fleet. "Commander Kithara, I wish I could explain it all to you right now, but we're a little busy at the moment. The important thing is that you're not alone anymore. Humanity has arrived, and we don't abandon our friends." For the first time in 3 years, Kithara allowed herself to believe that victory might be possible. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on us." Philip smiled as he watched another Vorthon ship explode under the combined fire of human and coalition vessels. "Ma'am, that's what we humans do best. We show up when things look impossible, and we change everything." The battle for Nexus Prime was far from over. But for the first time since the war began, the Vorthon Empire was retreating. The quantum communication network lit up across the galaxy like a chain of fireworks. On 17 different worlds under Vorthon control, the impossible news spread from planet to planet in seconds. Humans had arrived. The neural control could be broken. Freedom was possible. Colonel Amy Williams stood on the bridge of the assault ship Liberty Strike as it dropped out of fold space above the mining world of Kepler 7. Below them, millions of enslaved aliens worked in the vast strip mines, their mines controlled by Vorthon overseers. They had been digging precious metals for the Empire for over 2 years. "Ma'am, we're detecting heavy Vorthon presence on the surface," reported Sergeant Tim Johnson from the tactical station. "Looks like they've got about 5,000 ground troops and a dozen orbital defense platforms." Amy nodded grimly. The Liberty Strike only carried 300 human soldiers, but after what had happened at Nexus Prime, she knew the numbers didn't tell the whole story. "Launch all drop pods," she ordered. "Target the main mining complex. Let's go wake up some slaves." As the human soldiers descended toward the planet's surface, something extraordinary was happening across the Vorthan Empire. On every world where the quantum network had carried news of the human intervention, enslaved populations were beginning to resist. On the agricultural world of Centauri 9, a controlled farmer named Jektar heard the transmission while working in the fields. For 2 years his mind had been trapped in his own body, forced to grow food for his Vorthon masters. But as the news of humanity's immunity spread, something deep in his consciousness began to fight back. "Liberation is possible," he whispered. To himself, and for the first time in years, the words were his own. The Vorthon overseer standing nearby turned at the sound. "Worker Jektar, return to your duties. No speech is permitted during harvest time." But Jektar didn't obey. Instead, he looked directly at the reptilian alien and said the words that would start a revolution. "No." The overseer raised his neural control device, ready to strengthen the mental bonds that held Jektar prisoner. But something had changed. The device sparked and failed. The controlled farmer's mind was no longer fully under Vorthon power. Within minutes, the resistance spread. To other workers in the field, the neural control network that had kept them enslaved was weakening, just from the knowledge that freedom was possible. Meanwhile, in the Vorthon home system, Supreme Dominator Vex Thul stood in his command center, watching reports flood in from across the Empire. His scaled hands clenched into fists as he read each transmission. Rebellion on Kepler 7, neural control failing. Uprising on Centauri 9, workers refusing orders. Mining complex on Vega 12 under attack by freed slaves. "Sir," his communications officer said nervously, "we're receiving reports that the humans have deployed to 14 different systems simultaneously. Their fold space technology allows them to strike anywhere in the galaxy." Vexthul's yellow eyes burned with rage. For 3 years, his empire had expanded without a single defeat. Now, in the span of just 1 week, everything was falling apart. "How many humans are there?" he demanded. "Intelligence suggests their total population is only about 8 billion, sir. Their space fleet consists of maybe 50 ships. 50 ships? Vexthul's voice rose to a roar. 50 ships are destroying an empire of 3,000 star systems? The truth was even more remarkable. Humanity had deployed their forces in small groups across the galaxy, but their effect was multiplied by the psychological impact of their presence. Every world that learned about the humans began to hope. And hope, it turned out, was the Vorthon's greatest weakness. On Kepler 7, Colonel Williams watched as her soldiers moved through the mining complex, their mere presence causing the neural control effects to break down. Enslaved workers dropped their tools and picked up weapons, turning on their Vorthon overseers with years of suppressed rage. "Colonel," Sergeant Johnson called out over the radio, "we've got a problem. The Vorthons are threatening to destroy the entire mining operation rather than lose control of it." Williams looked up at the orbital defense platforms. The Vorthons had developed a scorched earth policy. If they couldn't control a world, they would destroy it completely. "All units, move to evacuation protocols. We need to get these people off-world before the Vorthons turn this place into a crater." But as her soldiers worked to evacuate the freed slaves, something unexpected happened. The newly liberated aliens didn't want to run. They wanted to fight. A tall, insect-like being approached Williams. His compound eyes were bright with newfound freedom. "Human Commander, my name is Zekmor. I was a ship captain before the Vorthons enslaved my world. Give me a weapon, and I will help you fight them." Williams looked around at the hundreds of freed aliens gathering around her soldiers. They all had the same look in their eyes. They had been prisoners for years, and now they wanted revenge. "Can you fly those Vorthon ships?" she asked, pointing to several captured vessels. Zekmor's mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. "Human Commander, I can fly anything with engines, and I know every weakness in Vorthon ship design." Within hours, the small human force had been joined by thousands of newly freed alien fighters. They captured Vorthan ships, weapons, and equipment, turning the Empire's own technology against them. The same pattern repeated across the galaxy. Wherever humans appeared, enslaved populations rose up. The Vorthans found themselves fighting not just 50 human ships, but millions of freed slaves who knew their weaknesses intimately. On the war-torn world of Proxima 3, Staff Sergeant Carlos Mendez led a daring raid on a Vorthan command center. His mission was to capture intelligence about the Empire's military structure, but what he found was much more disturbing. "Colonel Williams, you need to see this," Carlos transmitted from inside the captured facility. "I'm looking at historical records from the Vorthan homeworld. This neural control technology, and they didn't invent it." He activated his camera, showing ancient stone tablets covered in alien writing. According to these records, the Vorthans were enslaved themselves about 500 years ago by a species called the HFY. The neural control technology was used on them first. They only developed their own version after they broke free from their masters. Williams felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you saying the Vorthans were victims before they became conquerors?" "That's exactly what I'm saying, ma'am. The records show that after they freed themselves, they swore never to be enslaved again. But somewhere along the way, they decided the best defense was to enslave everyone else first." The revelation added a new layer of complexity to the war. The Vorthans weren't just evil conquerors. They were former slaves who had become so afraid of being controlled again that they had turned into the very thing they once fought against. But even this knowledge didn't change the immediate situation. The Vorthan Empire was still enslaving billions of beings across the galaxy, and they were becoming more desperate as their control slipped away. Reports came in of Vorthan forces destroying entire cities rather than lose them to human-led uprisings. Supreme Dominator Vexthul had issued orders to his fleet commanders. If a world could not be held, it should be sterilized. "Sir," came an urgent transmission to Colonel Williams from Earth Command. "We're detecting massive energy buildups in the Vorthan home system. Intelligence suggests they're preparing some kind of superweapon." Williams looked at the tactical display showing human forces scattered across dozens of star systems. They had been successful beyond their wildest dreams. But the war was far from over. "All human forces, this is Colonel Williams. We've learned that the Vorthans are planning something big. Prepare for final phase operations. We've given the galaxy hope, but now we need to finish what we started." Across the galaxy, freed slaves looked up at the stars and knew that the final battle was coming. The humans had kept their promise. They had not abandoned their new friends. But the hardest fight was still ahead. On the Vorthan homeworld, Supreme Dominator Vexthul stood before his war council, his yellow eyes filled with desperate fury. "If we cannot rule the galaxy," he said, "then no one will. Activate the Starkiller weapon. We will destroy every system that has fallen to the humans, even if it means destroying ourselves." The final battle for the freedom of the galaxy was about to begin. Admiral Nicole Thompson stood on the bridge of the human flagship Earth Shield, as the largest fleet in galactic history prepared for battle. Around her ship, hundreds of human vessels flew alongside thousands of coalition ships crewed by freed slaves. After 2 weeks of desperate fighting across the galaxy, everything came down to this moment. "Admiral, we're approaching the Vorthan home system," reported Captain Ben Carter from the navigation station. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures around their star." Thompson looked at the tactical display and felt her blood run cold. The Vorthans had positioned enormous machines around their sun, drawing energy directly from the star itself. If their intelligence was correct, this weapon could destroy entire solar systems. "Ma'am, incoming transmission from the Vorthan homeworld," the communications officer announced. "Put it through," Thompson ordered. Supreme Dominator Vexthul appeared on the main screen. The reptilian leader looked older and more desperate than before. His scales had lost their shine, and his yellow eyes burned with the fury of a cornered animal. "Admiral Thompson of the human fleet, I know who you are. You are the one who has destroyed my empire." "Supreme Dominator, you destroyed your own empire the moment you decided to enslave innocent beings," Thompson replied calmly. "Surrender now, And we can end this without more bloodshed. Bexthul's mouth twisted into a snarl. You think you understand us, human. You think we are merely conquerors. But you know nothing of our history. We were slaves once, just like the beings you have freed. We swore never to be enslaved again. Then why did you enslave others? Thompson asked. Because it was the only way to be safe, Bexthul roared. As long as free beings existed in the galaxy, there was always the chance that someone would try to control us again. The only true safety was absolute control. Thompson shook her head sadly. You became the very thing you feared most. You turned into the monsters who once enslaved you. And now you seek to destroy us just as we feared, Bexthul said. But we will not go quietly. The Starkiller weapon is charging. In 1 hour it will fire on every system you have liberated. Billions of beings will die, but the galaxy will be free of the chaos you have brought. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Admiral, Captain Carter said quietly, sensors confirm that the weapon is real. It's drawing massive amounts of energy from their star. If it fires, it could destroy dozens of star systems simultaneously. Thompson looked at her officers. They all knew what this meant. The Vorthans were willing to commit genocide rather than accept defeat. Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission from Commander Kethara, the communications officer reported. The bird-like alien appeared on a smaller screen. Behind her, Thompson could see the bridge of a coalition ship filled with freed slaves from a dozen different species. Admiral Thompson, our scientists have been analyzing the Starkiller weapon. We believe there might be a way to stop it, but it would require someone to get inside the Vorthan command center and manually disable the controls. That's a suicide mission, Thompson said bluntly. Anyone who goes down there won't be coming back. I know, Kethara replied. But if we don't try, everyone dies anyway. Admiral, your people have already sacrificed so much for beings you barely know. Let us make this sacrifice for you. Before Thompson could respond, another voice cut into the transmission. It was Colonel Steve Anderson, the leader of the human ground forces. With respect, Commander Kethara, my people volunteered for this mission. We didn't come all this way to let someone else finish the job. Thompson felt a surge of pride mixed with grief. She knew Anderson was right, but sending her people to their deaths was the hardest decision a commander could make. Colonel, you don't have to do this, she said. Yes, we do, Admiral. That's what makes us human. We don't abandon people even when it costs us everything. The assault began 30 minutes later. Human ships and freed coalition forces launched a massive attack on the Vorthon defenses, while Colonel Anderson led his team toward the planet's surface. The space battle was fierce, with ships exploding on both sides as they fought for control of the system. On the planet below, Anderson and his soldiers fought through waves of desperate Vorthan troops. The reptilian aliens knew they were fighting for their species' survival, and they defended every meter with suicidal determination. Colonel, the weapon will fire in 20 minutes, came a transmission from space. You need to hurry. Anderson kicked down the door to the command center and found himself face to face with Supreme Dominator Bexthul. The Vorthan leader was standing at the weapon controls, his hand hovering over the firing mechanism. Human, Bexthul said, you are too late. In 15 minutes, your precious liberated worlds will burn. It doesn't have to be this way, Anderson said, keeping his weapon trained on the alien. You can still choose to stop this madness. Choose? Bexthul laughed bitterly. We gave up the luxury of choice 500 years ago. When you are enslaved, when your mind is not your own, you learn that freedom is an illusion. Power is the only truth. You're wrong, Anderson said. Freedom is what we choose to do for others, even when it costs us everything. Before Bexthul could respond, Anderson's team burst into the room. Sergeant Maria Santos and her soldiers immediately began working on the weapon controls while Anderson kept the Vorthan leader at gunpoint. Colonel, we can disable the weapon, but someone needs to manually override the safety systems, Santos called out. The person who does it will be at ground zero when the energy feedback hits. Anderson looked around at his team. These soldiers had followed him across the galaxy to save people they had never met. They deserved to go home. I'll do it, he said simply. Sir, no, Santos protested. Let me. That's an order, Sergeant. Get your people out of here and make sure the weapon is destroyed. As his soldiers reluctantly evacuated the command center, Anderson turned to face Vexthul one last time. Your empire is finished, he said, but your people don't have to be. They can learn to live in peace just like everyone else. You truly believe that freedom is possible? Vexthul asked. I know it is, Anderson replied, because we're about to give it to you. He activated the override sequence and felt the building begin to shake as massive energies cascaded through the weapon systems. In space above, Admiral Thompson watched as brilliant explosions erupted across the planet's surface. Admiral, we're reading complete destruction of the Star Killer weapon, Captain Carter reported. Colonel Anderson's mission was successful. Thompson closed her eyes for a moment, honoring the sacrifice of a good man. When she opened them, she saw something that made her catch her breath. All across the Vorthan fleet, ships were powering down their weapons and sending surrender signals. Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission from the surviving Vorthan commanders, the communications officer said. A young Vorthan appeared on the screen. Unlike the older leaders, this one's eyes held no hatred, only exhaustion. Human fleet. This is Sub-Commander Rextal of the Vorthan forces. Supreme Dominator Vexthul is dead. We wish to surrender unconditionally. Sub-Commander, Thompson said gently. The war is over. Your people are free to choose their own path now. 3 months later, Admiral Thompson stood in the newly constructed Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the Great Hall, and at the center sat the Human Coalition Joint Command. Commander Kethara approached the podium, her feathers bright with health and hope. Today we establish the human protocols, she announced. Never again will any species face extinction alone. Never again will freedom die while others stand by and watch. Thompson looked out at the assembly and thought about Colonel Anderson and all the other humans who had given their lives to make this moment possible. They had kept humanity's promise. They had not abandoned their friends. In the section reserved for former Vorthan worlds, Sub-Commander Rextal raised his hand. The Vorthan Republic wishes to formally join the Galactic Coalition, he said. We have much to atone for, but we choose to do it as free beings, not as slaves to our own fears. As the assembly erupted in cheers, Thompson smiled. Humanity had come to the stars not as conquerors, but as liberators. They had proven that even in the darkest moments, hope could light the way to freedom. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly how it should be. Outside the chamber windows, ships from 100 worlds flew together in formation, their crews working side by side regardless of species. The age of enslavement was over. The age of freedom had begun.